Chapter 19. Stella felt the telltale throb of a migraine setting in as she gazed at the wall of code in front of her with a furrowed brow. Lines of data flickered across her screen, each one more unsettling than the last. Violet's call last night gave her pause. Her tone was unusually urgent. Violet rarely sounded the alarm, so when she did, Stella knew it was serious. Stella trusted Violet's instincts. Her colleague wasn't one to get rattled easily. She'd handled high-stakes projects with the cool composure of someone who'd spent years deciphering complex data. If she'd flagged this issue, then there was more at stake than just a minor glitch. She pulled up the recent modifications to the GHKH branch, scrutinizing Garrett's updates. At first glance, everything looked sound. The repeat offender protocol was a clever addition, designed to discourage animals from repeatedly encroaching on certain areas. But as Stella dug deeper, she felt a cold prickle of dread. The model wasn't just differentiating animals. It was learning to categorize threats based on environmental cues, motion patterns, and even past logs. In short, it was deciding what was hostile based on incomplete data, and she could already see the troubling implications. As she dissected the code further, she noticed an algorithm layer labeled Behavioral Override. Her heart sank as she began to realize what it was doing. The drones weren't avoiding obstacles, they were targeting specific animals. They were starting to track specific visual markers, movements, and shapes. The more a particular pattern appeared in the field, the more likely the drones were to mark it as a repeat offender and respond with increasing hostility. She closed her eyes, releasing a slow, controlled breath. It was subtle but unmistakable. The system could easily mistake an unexcluded mammal, like a person crossing the field multiple times, for a pest. Garrett's approach was risky. He had the large language model, LLM, set to interpret unknown objects when the image recognition failed to make a definitive match. Under the wrong conditions, the drones might classify that person as a threat and start swarming. And the swarming code had a critical flaw. There was no minimum distance safeguard. What Garrett had implemented was known as a microstep. The code established an initial safe distance of 1 meter to keep the drones from an animal. But if the animal didn't leave the protected area, the drone would close in by half, reducing the distance to a half meter, then a quarter of a meter, and so on, a number approaching 0 but never quite reaching it. What Garrett had overlooked, however, was where this distance was measured. It was being calculated from the center of the drone, not accounting for the drone's propellers, which extended at least 6 inches on each side. This miscalculation meant that, at some point, collision was inevitable. Stella's hands trembled as she opened the internal messaging app and typed a response to Violet. "You are right to worry. Garrett's update is making the system too aggressive, and there are no safeguards. It would confuse a person for an intruder if they're in the field and the image is blurry." Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard as a new thought hit her. Alice. She remembered Alice mentioning the tweaks she'd integrated from GHKH into her farm drones. Alice had been so thrilled about the updates, eager to make her drones more autonomous and efficient. But with these new findings, Stella's excitement for Alice's project now twisted into a knot of fear. She texted Alice immediately. "Stella, turn off the drones, I found a bug." Swallowing her anxiety, she tried calling again, but still nothing. The image of Alice out there, unwittingly facing a swarm of increasingly hostile machines, sent a chill down her spine. "Alice, I let the batteries die last night. They targeted Paul in the field yesterday. Figured it was something I did." With a renewed sense of urgency, Stella returned to her laptop, typing furiously. She had to patch this, and fast. She put in a hard stop in the aggression algorithm, no closer than a meter, ever. A small change, but one Garrett had failed to put in. Then she began coding a critical update to block the drones from tracking humans entirely, writing it to override the machine learning protocols that Garrett had introduced. It was a blunt solution, one that would reduce the drone's responsiveness, but she couldn't risk waiting. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she crafted a custom filter to force the system to ignore any behavior patterns that could be associated with people. Movements, shapes, even clothing colors. She couldn't allow a machine to decide, based on skewed parameters, who or what was a threat. Stella paused, her gaze resting on a photo of her and Finnick at the edge of her desk. She'd built this project on the belief that technology could help protect the environment, that it would be a force for good. But now she wondered if she'd underestimated how easily her work could veer off course in the wrong hands. With a final keystroke, she pushed the code update, setting it to propagate to every fork of the repository. As she watched the system process her changes, she crafted a message to everyone using the software. Urgent. All users download the latest update immediately. This patch prevents collision and human tracking within the repeat offender model. Ensure your systems are synced. This is a critical safety measure. Her finger hovered over the send button. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and pressed it. The message flashed out, leaving her sitting alone in the quiet of her home, the snoring of the dog and hum of her computer filling the silence.